You ever wake up thinking it's just another quiet morning? Sun's shining, birds are chirping, coffee's brewing, and then boom, your entire life flips over because someone with a clipboard thinks they know better? That's how it all started for me. One yellow envelope, one ridiculous fine, one power-hungry HOA president named Evelyn. What she didn't know? I built this community, literally. And the garage she tried to find me over? It was in a house I designed, on land I owned. But when petty turns a personal, and personal turns unlawful, well, let's just say the game changes. This isn't a story about revenge, it's about reminding people who really holds the deed to the truth. The morning started like any other. The Colorado sky was still stretching itself awake as I stepped onto the front porch of my home in Riverbend Ridge, with a steaming mug of black coffee and a worn-out pair of slippers. Birds chirped lazily, and the sun barely kissed the horizon. But that moment of peace shattered when I spotted the envelope, bright yellow, glaring, and taped neatly to my front door. Even before I read it, I knew something was wrong. That color was too loud for anything good. I peeled it off and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Violation notice, it began, in a font that was way too bold for the nonsense it carried. Per HOA Regulation 7.3b, no more than 4 vehicles may be stored on any private property. You currently have 5. Immediate corrective action required to avoid fines or further escalation. I blinked, read it again, then again. 5 cars. Inside my own garage. Not on the curb, not blocking anyone's sidewalk, not rusting on the lawn. 5 meticulously parked, well-maintained vehicles. My SUV, a luxury sedan, my sports coupe, a fully electric daily driver, and an old '67 Mustang I've rebuilt with my son over the years. I let out a breath that came out more like a scoff and leaned against the porch railing. What made it laughable wasn't just the absurdity of the fine. It was the fact that I, Lucas Ryan, was the one who built Riverbend Ridge. Literally. I bought the land, developed the homes, financed every street lamp and speed bump. The HOA? That was something I approved in good faith, hoping the residents would self-govern minor matters. Landscaping, shared amenities, maybe a potluck calendar. But over the last 2 years, it had warped into something I didn't recognize. And at the helm of it all, Evelyn Marks, self-appointed queen of the HOA. Blonde bob, pastel cardigans, and a voice that could cut glass when she said words like decorum and community integrity. I'd always suspected she had ambitions beyond the garden club. But this? A fine on me? The bottom of the notice was stamped with her signature and a little threatening footnote. Repeat offenses may result in legal action or foreclosure proceedings. I read that part twice, then let out a low, disbelieving chuckle. Foreclosure? Of my own house? In a development I still technically owned the master deed to? I could have ignored it, thrown it out, and carried on with my day. But that's not who I am. I took my coffee back inside, grabbed my folder labeled Founding Docs Riverbend, and sat down at the kitchen table. I hadn't looked through this paperwork in years, but I remembered the key detail. Any changes to HOA regulations must be reviewed and signed off by the developer, namely, me. That clause existed to protect the integrity of the development in case any overzealous board ever got ideas. Guess who'd never approved any 4-car rule? I found the original bylaws, highlighted the clause, and then, just for fun, I flipped to the page where my veto powers were outlined. There it was, in black and white. Evelyn had no legal authority to fine me. None. But I wasn't about to call her and explain it calmly. No. I wanted to see the look on her face. When I showed her, she'd picked a fight with the wrong man. I threw on my jacket, tucked the violation notice under my arm like a trophy, and made my way down the main road to the HOA's little cubicle in the community center. The place was deserted, except for a teenager chewing gum behind the front desk. She didn't look up from her phone until I cleared my throat. "I need to speak to Evelyn Marks," I said. She gave me the kind of look you reserve for someone trying to return a half-eaten burger. Do you have an appointment? Tell her it's the owner of the development. She'll want to make time. That got her attention. She blinked, then disappeared into the back room. 2 minutes later, Evelyn emerged in her usual uniform, pressed slacks, a white blouse with a pink scarf tied around her neck, like she was prepping for a yacht club luncheon. "Oh," she said, lips tight. "Lucas, didn't expect to see you here." I smiled and held up the yellow envelope. "Thought I'd drop by in person. Seems we've got a little misunderstanding." She motioned me toward the tiny meeting room. "I don't think there's much to discuss. The HOA has clear guidelines. You're violating them." I stepped inside the room but didn't sit. "Let me stop you there," I said. "You're issuing fines based on rules that were never approved by me. And I think you know exactly what that means." Her eyes narrowed. "The HOA has full jurisdiction, only over what's been delegated to it," I cut in. "And this was not. I've got the original documents right here." I dropped the folder onto the table with a satisfying thud. Section 5.2. No regulation becomes enforceable without developer consent. You bypassed that. Illegally. Evelyn's face flushed. "I don't need to remind you," I added, "that I still hold majority voting shares in Riverbend Ridge's original trust." There was a long silence as her confidence drained, inch by inch. Still, Evelyn was nothing if not stubborn. "You're undermining community order. People look to the HOA to maintain standards." I leaned in. "Standards are one thing. Petty power grabs are another. And if you ever threaten foreclosure on my home again, I'll take it as a personal attack and respond accordingly. Legally." She looked like she wanted to spit, but knew better. "I'm suspending the HOA board," I said flatly, "effective immediately. Until I audit every policy you've implemented. You've made a mistake, Evelyn, and I think it's about time the community saw it for what it is." Then I walked out. By the time I returned home that afternoon, the email was already waiting in my inbox. Subject line, HOA, clarification on community leadership from evelyn.marks@riverbendhoa.org to all residents, Riverbend Ridge. Dear residents, there has been confusion regarding recent statements made by Mr. Lucas Ryan. Please be advised that his claims regarding the dissolution of the HOA are unfounded. The HOA remains in full operational status. We will not allow one individual, regardless of former development ties, to disrupt the harmony and values of our beloved community. Sincerely, Evelyn Marks, President, Riverbend Ridge, HOA. I read it twice, my jaw tightening a little more each time. Former development ties? The woman had no shame. She was spinning it like I was some bitter retiree trying to reclaim power over my sandbox. Within the hour, Evelyn had posted the letter on the community bulletin board, had copies placed in every mailbox, and sent a mass text blast directing people to an emergency HOA meeting that very weekend to discuss the future of community leadership. I sat at my kitchen table, trying not to laugh. She didn't just ignore my legal authority. She declared war. But what she didn't know, or refused to believe, was that this wasn't my first time dealing with people who mistook paperwork for power. I hadn't built Riverbend Ridge from scratch without knowing how to play the long game. And the long game? It required patience, evidence, and making sure I wasn't the one lighting the match when the house went up in flames. That night, I took a walk through the neighborhood. It was sunset, golden hour. The houses glowed. Children played on manicured lawns. A couple walked their dog in silence. It looked like any perfect suburban evening, until I noticed the shift. Where once I got waves and small talk, I now got cold stares, murmurs. "Is that him? Did you hear he tried to dissolve the HOA? Typical rich guy. Thinks rules don't apply." It stung more than I expected, because I wasn't trying to be above the rules. I was trying to protect everyone from rules that never should have existed, ones passed in secret, never voted on, weaponized by a woman who was using the HOA as her personal kingdom. And yet, somehow, I was the villain now. The next morning, Lisa Pearson, a longtime neighbor and probably the only resident still on speaking terms with me, knocked on my door. She held a reusable grocery bag and a cautious smile. "I brought muffins," she said, "and a warning." Bleh. We sat on the back porch while I poured her coffee. Lisa wasn't part of the HOA board, but she'd attended nearly every meeting since its founding. "Evelyn's organizing support," she said, "telling people you're trying to privatize the community, sell off green spaces, raise dues. Whatever lie sounds the scariest." "She's the one abusing power," I said, trying not to let my voice rise. "I know that. Some others do too," Lisa said gently. "But most people? They don't read bylaws. They read bullet points on flyers." That hit me hard, because it was true. The truth was in black and white, filed and signed, stamped and certified. But Evelyn was winning hearts with headlines. If I wanted to stop her, I'd need more than logic. I'd need proof, stories, people who could testify to what she'd really done behind the scenes. Lisa reached into her bag again. "I found something," she said, handing me a folded piece of paper. It was an old HOA memo, the one about the beautification initiative that led to a dozen surprise citations for overgrown shrubs and non-regulation patio furniture. But scrawled in the margins of the page was a note. "Find those three first. They spoke out against me at the last meeting. Let them be the example." It was Evelyn's handwriting, and it was a start. By midweek, the whispers had turned into open tension. Evelyn's campaign wasn't just about flyers and dramatic emails anymore. She'd taken to standing in the cul-de-sac after school drop-off, talking to parents, handing out pamphlets like she was running for mayor. Except her pitch wasn't about building anything. It was about tearing me down. "Do you really want someone who doesn't even live by the rules running the community?" she said loudly one morning as I passed by on my walk. "He thinks because he funded the development he owns us." That one hit harder than I expected. I kept walking, but I could feel it. Eyes, assumptions, silent judgments. People were buying her narrative. The next morning, a letter arrived at my door. Not an email. A certified envelope. Inside was a formal cease and desist order from the HOA's legal team. "Mr. Ryan, it has come to our attention that you have been distributing false and misleading information regarding the Homeowners Association and its leadership. Your statements represent a direct threat to the integrity of this community and may constitute libel under California law. Cease all unauthorized communications regarding HOA governance or face legal recourse." The paper shook in my hand, not because I was scared, but because I saw it for what it was, a bluff, an attempt to silence me. And it proved one thing. Evelyn was afraid I was getting close to the truth. I called Janet, my lawyer, fierce, fast-talking, and sharp as glass. "She's trying to intimidate you," Janet said. "They're overstepping again. The HOA has no legal authority to silence a property owner from speaking, especially not the developer." "And what about her making public claims that I'm planning to sell off public green space?" Janet paused. "That's defamation. And if you can prove it, it's going to backfire badly." So that became the plan, expose Evelyn using her own rules. Not just what she was saying, but how she was violating everything she claimed to stand for. That same night, Lisa called again. "You need to talk to Sam," she said. "He was on the original board. He quit last year, quietly." I drove over to Sam's house just after sunset. His place sat on the edge of the neighborhood. Neat lawn, porch light flickering, the hum of sprinklers in the background. When he opened the door, he didn't look surprised to see me. "Figured you'd come eventually," he said. We sat in his garage, surrounded by half-finished wood projects and the scent of sawdust. Sam didn't speak at first. He just took a long pull from his beer, then said, "She's worse than you think." Well, he went on to explain that in the past 18 months, Evelyn had funneled HOA funds into private improvement projects, landscaping contracts with companies owned by her cousin, a $7,000 security camera system for only her street, and a mysterious line item marked consulting fees with no receipts. She made it impossible to question her, Sam said. Changed the bylaws quietly, required all financial reviews to go through her first. I tried to bring it up in a meeting, and then suddenly I was resigning due to stress. She wrote the email herself. My stomach turned. Do you have proof? I asked. Sam nodded. I kept copies. Thought it might be useful someday. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to shake the tree, and maybe bring the whole rotten orchard down. But something else happened. Something that reminded me this wasn't just about power or property lines. I got a call from Ms. Douglas, a widow in her 70s who'd lived in Riverbend since the first phase was built. Her voice trembled on the line. Mr. Ryan, I know you're busy, but Evelyn sent me a violation notice. Says my garden gnome violates community standards. I blinked. A garden gnome? She laughed nervously. It's been there for 6 years. My husband picked it out before he passed. It's not hurting anyone. But the letter says if I don't remove it by Friday, I'll be fined. I didn't know what angered me more, the pettiness or the cruelty. Don't move that gnome, I told her. In fact, leave it exactly where it is. I'll handle the rest. What Evelyn hadn't realized was this. In trying to paint me as the villain, she'd overreached. She'd turned the pressure up so high that cracks were forming. And now, people were starting to talk. Lisa, Sam, Ms. Douglas, the Thompsons, who quietly admitted Evelyn charged them $500 for an unpermitted vegetable garden. Even the Millers, who never spoke to anyone, came forward with a written record of Evelyn approving a fence design, then fining them for it. The pieces were coming together, but the best piece. That came from Lisa's 16-year-old daughter, Ava, who worked part-time helping sort HOA communications. She found something buried deep in Evelyn's emails, an internal memo showing that the vote to limit garage vehicles, the very fine she'd used against me, had never passed. No quorum, no record of the vote. Evelyn had made it up, and that was the final spark I needed. The following Saturday, Lucas didn't just plan to attend the community meeting. He planned to make it unforgettable. The HOA's monthly meeting, normally a sleepy gathering of 15 residents discussing mailbox uniformity and holiday decorations, now drew more than 60 people. Word had spread. There was a buzz in the air, neighbors whispering before it began, wondering what was going to happen. At the head of the room, Evelyn sat in her usual place, wearing a navy blue blazer like it was armor. Beside her were the remaining board members, none of whom dared to meet Lucas's eyes when he walked in. Lucas didn't sit. He walked straight to the front row and placed a manila folder on the community podium. I have a statement, he said, loud and clear. Evelyn raised a hand. This is a closed meeting, Lucas smiled. Correction. This is a community meeting, and I believe the community deserves to hear what I have to say. A few people clapped. Evelyn scowled, but didn't stop him. Over the past 2 weeks, Lucas began, there's been a campaign of misinformation, abuse of power, and in some cases outright fraud, all carried out under the name of protecting community standards. He opened the folder and began distributing printed pages, maps, bylaws, financial records. You've all heard about the supposed new vehicle limit regulation, the one that led to fines, threats of auction, and public shaming. But here's the truth. That rule never passed. There was never a quorum. No official vote, no record. Gasps spread across the room. A woman in the back raised her hand. Then why were we fined? Lucas nodded. Ask Evelyn. All heads turned. Evelyn stood slowly. This is ridiculous, she said. We followed procedure. Everything was voted on. Lucas clicked a small remote, and a projection appeared on the wall behind him. An email, sent from Evelyn's official HOA account. Just push it through. Most won't notice. Evelyn T., March 12th, 8:42 a.m. She froze. Lisa Martinez stepped forward. That's your email, Evelyn. I saw it in Ava's inbox. That's taken out of context. But it was too late. The room erupted. Did you fake the vote? You fined us based on a rule that didn't exist? What else did you lie about? Lucas raised his voice above the chaos. That's not all. He clicked again. A projected spreadsheet filled the wall. $7,440 in HOA funds paid to Clearview Landscapes, a company registered to Evelyn's cousin. $3,000 for a security study that only covered her block. $500 consulting fee, marked as cash withdrawn. Evelyn turned pale. That's a lie. It was approved. By you, Lucas cut in. You signed your own disbursement slips. The room was boiling now. Furious voices. Demands for resignation. Neighbors standing up. Someone yelled, "Motion to remove the board." And hands shot into the air. But before it got completely out of control, Lucas raised one hand. "I'm not here to burn this place down," he said. "This is still our community, our homes. But we deserve transparency, fairness, and leadership that's actually accountable." And he paused. "I propose we suspend the current board, appoint a temporary oversight committee, conduct a full audit, and once the truth is clear, we let the community decide what comes next." For the first time, Evelyn looked small, deflated. She sat back down, silent. The vote passed 48-4. That night, Lisa, Sam, and a few other neighbors gathered on Lucas's porch. They brought pizza, drinks, even a bottle of champagne someone had saved since New Year's. "To truth," Sam said, raising a glass. "To accountability," Lisa added. Lucas smiled. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Because people like Evelyn don't go quietly. And just as he took a sip, his phone buzzed. Blocked number. "You think it's over? I've got friends in the city planning office. Enjoy your little victory while it lasts." Lucas didn't flinch. Instead, he opened his laptop. Because what Evelyn didn't know, what she never understood, was that Lucas hadn't just been fighting back. He'd been building something. Just 3 days after the board was suspended, Lucas received a certified letter from the Pine Grove County Zoning Office. He stared at the official envelope for a few seconds before opening it. Inside was a notice of zoning reevaluation. According to the letter, his property, yes, the entire estate he developed and owned, was now under consideration for reclassification due to conflict with evolving residential designations. Translation? Someone was trying to push him out, legally, and Lucas had a good idea who was behind it. He drove straight to the zoning office. The receptionist gave him a form to fill out and asked him to wait. 30 minutes passed before he was called into a cramped office with a man named Clark Renshaw, the Assistant Director of Zoning and Development. "Mr. Shaw," Clark said, his tone unusually neutral. "We've received complaints about the non-residential use of certain properties under your name." "I live there," Lucas said calmly, "and the so-called complaints are coming from someone whose power trip ended last week." Clark didn't blink. "That may be. But the reevaluation is a process we're obligated to undertake once a certain number of formal complaints are received." Lucas leaned forward. "Do you know who submitted those complaints?" Clark hesitated for a moment. "They're anonymous." Lucas nodded slowly, biting back his frustration. "I'll need a copy of the complaints, the review timeline, and the name of the city official who authorized this file to be opened." "That's confidential. Not if I subpoena it." British. There was a long silence. Clark shifted uncomfortably. "Look, off the record, Evelyn Chambers has a cousin who works in this office, and she's been calling in favors." Lucas stood up, collecting the letter. "Thanks for confirming what I already knew." Before leaving, he turned back. "And Clark, this is going to blow back hard on anyone who helps her." That night, Lucas sat down with his attorney, Jenna, and Lisa. They reviewed every zoning clause, every potential loophole. She's trying to get your property labeled as non-conforming residential, so she can trigger forced compliance or removal of unapproved structures, Jenna explained. Lisa looked horrified. Can she do that? Not unless the board votes on it, Jenna replied. But if she's pulling strings at the county level, Lucas exhaled. Then, we need to do what we do best. Hit her where it hurts. Facts, documents, public support. He wasn't just going to fight this quietly. He was going to expose it. By the next morning, Lucas had uploaded a video titled, "When HOA Corruption Goes Countywide. My Story, My Land, My Fight." Within 24 hours, it had over 200,000 views. People flooded the HOA's former Facebook group, demanding accountability. Residents of nearby neighborhoods began sharing their own horror stories. A local journalist reached out, asking for an interview. Then a second. Then a podcast invitation. Lucas didn't just tell his story. He started a movement. A week later, Lucas held a town hall-style meeting at the community center. This time, there were reporters, city council members, even representatives from the county office present. Evelyn tried to sneak in quietly, wearing sunglasses, dressed down. But everyone saw her. Lucas took the mic. "I didn't ask for this war," he said, voice steady. "But I won't let someone rewrite the rules just because they lost control." He laid out the zoning scheme, the emails, the financial abuse. Jenna walked the room through the legal roadmap. Lisa gave an emotional account of how fear and silence had ruled the neighborhood until people stood up. Then a councilwoman raised her hand. "Mr. Shaw, are you suggesting county employees collaborated with a former HOA president to retaliate against a private resident?" "I'm not suggesting," Lucas said. "I'm stating it, and I'm ready to prove it." There was a long pause. The weight of the statement hung heavy. Evelyn stood abruptly, trying to leave, but she wasn't fast enough to avoid the cameras. Back home that night, Lucas sat on his back porch, sipping tea as twilight settled over the neighborhood. His phone buzzed with an email alert. Subject: County Review Suspended. Pine Grove Zoning Board. Message: Due to inconsistencies and conflict of interest concerns, your property's reclassification process has been terminated, pending further investigation. Lucas let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. Because sometimes, before justice arrives, it gets really, really quiet. And then, Act 3 begins. It had been 3 weeks since the zoning committee dropped the case. Lucas had thought the silence meant things were winding down. He was wrong. The quiet wasn't peace. It was the sound of a storm, building momentum. One Tuesday morning, a knock came at Lucas's door. 2 federal agents, polite but stern. "Mr. Shaw," one said, flashing a badge. "We're with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're investigating multiple allegations of fraud involving the Pine Grove Homeowners Association and possible misuse of municipal connections." Lucas blinked. "I'm sorry. Fraud?" The other agent nodded. "You triggered a chain reaction. Turns out your case was the tip of the iceberg. Would you mind sitting down with us?" What followed was a 2-hour interview where Lucas recounted every detail: the zoning threats, the emails, the suspicious letters, the forged document Evelyn had used to declare him removed as the landowner. He provided timestamps, paper trails, and video footage. They were particularly interested in one specific document: the internal HOA memo Evelyn used to declare that the board had removed the owner. It had no legal standing, but it bore a digital timestamp that was linked to a deleted HOA server account, registered under a Pine Grove County employee's credentials. In other words, someone inside the zoning office helped her forge a fake legal removal. "This goes beyond local politics," one agent said. "This could be a case of abuse of power and criminal conspiracy. Not by county deputies this time, by federal marshals." It made the evening news, twice. Former HOA president arrested for fraud, forgery, and attempted property theft. The footage showed her being led away from her oversized house in handcuffs, her carefully curled hair blowing in the wind. Her designer heels clicked helplessly on the pavement as she screamed at the reporters to, "Get that camera out of my face!" Lucas watched it from his porch, calm, quiet. But inside, something shifted. He felt relief. Yes. But more than that, he felt responsibility. People had rallied behind his fight. Neighbors, strangers online, city officials. His story had become a catalyst for change, and he couldn't just step back into quiet retirement after this. The next morning, Lucas filed papers with the county clerk's office to create a new community council. One based not on arbitrary rules, but on collaboration, transparency, and shared resources. Lisa joined as the first co-chair. Jenna agreed to oversee legal and compliance standards. Residents from neighboring subdivisions asked to participate. A ripple effect had begun. The turnout was overwhelming. People came, not only from Pine Grove, but nearby neighborhoods who'd seen the viral videos, read the articles, and whispered their own HOA horror stories in private for too long. Lucas took the stage one final time. "I never set out to tear anything down," he said. "But sometimes the only way to build something better is to clear the rot at the foundation." Applause thundered through the room. Lisa stepped forward and announced the new Pine Grove Neighborhood Alliance, a voluntary group focused on community projects, shared gardens, weekend cleanup drives, a local barter board, support groups for seniors. And best of all, no fines, no absurd rules, no power-hungry bureaucrats, just people, helping people. She pled guilty. In exchange for reduced jail time, she surrendered her property, agreed to repay misused funds, and was permanently barred from holding any residential leadership position again. The house that once symbolized her rule? It was sold to a young couple with twin toddlers and a puppy named Waffles. Lucas waved to them from his driveway as they moved in. The father waved back. The mother smiled. "We heard you're the one who saved the neighborhood," Lucas chuckled. "Nah, I just reminded people it belonged to them." Lucas stood at the edge of a new neighborhood garden, watching teenagers paint murals on the community shed. Kids laughed nearby as they played in the dirt, planting tomatoes and sunflowers. A few old-timers sat on folding chairs, sipping lemonade and swapping stories. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was theirs. And above all else, it was free. It was